Good morning, Knicks Nation. I hope you had a good weekend. It is now Monday, the 28th of September. And I wanted to talk about the New York Knicks and the next year, the next 12 months, what it should look like for the New York Knicks and for our development. Now, um, there have been a lot of people speculating or hoping that the Knicks look at point guards in this particular draft. The names LaMelo Ball, obviously, Killian Hayes, Tyrese Halliburton, and Kyra Lewis have been the top names that most people have been looking at. Now, some want the Knicks to draft a point guard at 8. Some want the Knicks to trade picks and move up in the draft to take a point guard. I'm going to tell you why the Knicks should not do that and probably will not do that in this coming draft. A couple things. Number one, let's just real quick review what we already know, what most of us already know as New York Knicks fans. We are a developing team, and we're not in a position right now. We're not looking at playoffs this coming year. We're developing our young players, or beginning to, understanding that over the last 3 years, I think particularly, the Knicks have failed to develop properly any of their draft picks. They failed to develop properly any of their draft picks. And so with Tom Thibodeau, with Johnny Bryant, with Walt Perrin, with Mike Woodson, Kenny Payne, the Knicks now have a group of coaches that specialize in the development of young players. On the positive side, we do have players that have been in the NBA for 3 years now, like Frank Ntilikina and Dennis Smith Jr., or even Mitchell Robinson will be in his 3rd year, I believe, this coming year. And then you have also Kevin Knox, who will be in his 3rd year this coming year. So having been in New York for 2 or 3 seasons and being in the NBA for 2 or 3 seasons, they're not starting from scratch. I mean, they haven't been properly developed, but they're not starting from scratch. But you have to make decisions on some of these players. Okay, you have to make decisions on some of these players. And what the Knicks, in terms of, we talked about changing the culture, what they don't want to do is just kind of give up on some of these players already without having done any proper due diligence, without having done any proper development, without having closely worked with them, without having them really know what they can do. So they really don't at this point. Okay. So, and that's been, again, historically speaking, that's been a Knick problem over the last 20 years. Getting rid of players, that you shouldn't get rid of, drafting players that you shouldn't have drafted, trading for players that you shouldn't have traded for. That's been a Knick problem for a while now. It's been a Knick problem for a while. And so, for example, in the last 20 years, they traded Marcus Camby. They traded the draft rights to Nene. They traded, Trevor Ariza. And then there's other times, like, for example, one of the best guards the Knicks, I feel, aside from Walt Frazier and Earl Monroe, but one of the best guards they ever had, okay, aside from all, and then they traded Mark Jackson. They drafted Mark Jackson as well, and he was Rookie of the Year. We traded him, then we got him back and traded him again. Okay, and so, but I was, anyway, we traded and we've messed up on a lot of trades, a lot of players, and we traded some of these guys for garbage. Okay. For garbage. So what we don't want to do is continue that. And so what we want to do is maximize the players that we have already drafted. You have to understand, my Knick Nation brethren, when a general manager is sitting in that seat, it's a high pressure job. This is not NBA 2K where you just switch and move players at your whim. This is a serious investment. So when you are drafting a player, these are real dollars we're talking about. Millions of dollars are at stake. Okay. And so, lots of general managers and presidents and coaches have lost their jobs based on making decisions that to trade or to pick, make them bad decisions like that. Okay. And so, and of course, as Knicks fans, we have seen a litany of general managers come through. Team presidents, coaches come through based on decisions they make. Now, a lot of the coaches were just scapegoats. You guys have to agree with that. You've had some great coaches come through here. Lenny Wilkins, Larry Brown. You've had some great coaches come through here that have gotten fired. And it wasn't because they were terrible coaches, obviously, because they're Hall of Fame resumes. It's because they were scapegoats for a bad organization or a badly run organization. So now the Knicks are trying to turn this around. So you have players like Frank Ntilikina, like Dennis Smith Jr. that are in their fourth year. You have to make a decision concerning them. And before you make that decision, you want to make sure you know what you have in these players. Okay? Which is why I believe Frank's going to start at the point guard position, because we have to see what we have. Now, as I've made very clear, I'm a huge Frank Ntilikina fan. I think the kid's going to be I think he's going to be an all NBA defense. And I think he's going to be a double figure scorer. Now you tell me what I was looking at, and you're going to think, but I'm crazy, but look at the numbers of Frank, of Marcus Smart, and of Gary Payton in their first 3 years. Look at the numbers. Frank is very favorable. He's probably got the best numbers of those three for his first 3 years. Okay. I think Gary Payton's 3-point shot was 20%. He was shooting 20% from three or less in his third year. Okay. Marcus Smart was like 25%. Frank was 32 this year, but it's increased from 29. And I think I'm looking at a 35% to 37%, 3-point shot for that kid this year, plus all NBA defense based in Tom Thibodeau's defensive system. So, I like the kid, but just to be fair, we have to see what we have with him, because one of the glaring statistics that people don't talk about with Frank Ntilikina, and Dennis Smith Jr. not as much because I compared him to, but with Frank particularly, of the players I name, of Marcus Smart, even Emmanuel Mudiay, and of course Gary Payton, all of these guys by their third year was playing 35, 30, 32, 35 minutes a game. Frank has only averaged 20 minutes a game for the whole 3 years. Now, if he's an overall number 8 pick, and you want to determine if this lottery pick can play for you, I think it's just common sense that you would play him more than 30 minutes a game, just to see what you have. I mean, look what they did with RJ last year. They played RJ over 30 minutes a game, as they should. He's a lottery pick. RJ was laying bricks all year, which is no problem because you're developing him. Okay? But Frank has not gotten that kind of time. Well, we want to see what we got. So to me, this year, I'm pretty sure you're going to see 30 plus minutes a game for Frank, 30 plus minutes a game for RJ this year. And they're going to run Mitchell Robinson too. We're going to see what we got. They got to make a decision with him, whether to extend him or not. And I think they should extend him 4 years, $56 million, which is the number that is the standard number for somebody in his position in terms of how he was drafted and what he's eligible for. I think we should lock him up and not have to worry about him for 4 more years. But that's a decision they got to make. So they got to run these guys to find out what they have. And not only that, let's talk about 2021. You can probably see on the thumbnail, I have some high school and freshman prospects on my thumbnail. Why? Let me tell you what we're not looking at in 2021. I keep trying to tell you Knick fans this, but you guys are not getting it. We're not looking at Giannis Antetokounmpo. We're not looking at Anthony Davis. We're not going to get any top tier free agent next year. It's not going to happen. And if you understand that, what you want to do is plan around that. So we're not planning for top tier free agents next year. Maybe 2022, maybe 2023, as these players that we have are developed. But what we are looking at for 2021 is next year's draft class. Next year's draft class, which is led by 2 guards, Jalen Green and Cade Cunningham, is supposed to be the best, is rated as one of the possible best draft class since LeBron and D Wade came out and Melo came out in 2004. It's supposed to be that type of talent. So let's say we want a point guard. Let's see some of y'all, I heard a lot of comments, if only we had a real point guard. It's such a diss on Frank. It's stupid. But anyway, if you want a quote unquote real point guard, next year we have 2 picks in the first round. And there's elite that, let's see, not just those two guys. I'm looking at a Caleb Love. I'm looking at Jalen Suggs. I'm looking at, there's different players here that are going to be available. There's at least a Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, Brandon Boston. There's at least 4 or 5 guys at the guard spot that all are better than anybody that's coming out this year. All of them are rated as more impact players than anybody that's coming out this year. So when the Knicks, I don't think, are going to waste a pick on another point guard when they don't even know what they have with the guys they now have. So you want to run them to death this year. You want to see what you have. You want to push them to the limit. Because again, we're not looking for playoffs. We're not looking for championship. We're looking to see what we have. And then you can make an evaluation next year. Because see, next year is a year you might want to trade up to get a Cade Cunningham, to get a Jalen Green. That's what you're talking about. To get a Suggs. You might want to trade up for one of these guys next year. But in order to do that, you got to find out what you have available as far as who's going to be with your team and who you're going to trade next year. Okay. So you want to look hard at a Kevin Knox. You want to look hard at Mitchell Roberts. You want to look hard at Frank Ntilikina, Dennis Smith Jr. You want to put them out there 25, 30 minutes a game. You want to find out what you have, not just for 5 games or 10 games, for the whole season. Push these guys. And let me tell you something. This is the thing about pro basketball. We talk about the business of pro basketball. Let's talk a little bit about the competition of pro basketball. So we watched the Denver Nuggets. We watched the Denver Nuggets lose in the Western Conference Finals to the Los Angeles Lakers this past weekend. Okay. But what did we find out from the Denver Nuggets? Well, they have a star in the Joker, right? Nikola Jokic is a star. I think we all agree with that. Okay. They have a star in Jamal Murray. So that next year, whoever they're drafting or whatever happens, nobody's taking those 2 guys' place. Their spot is secure. Okay. They got an unrestricted free agent or a guy that can be an unrestricted free agent in Jeremy Grant, who's going to opt out of his $9 million for next year. And he's going to get paid. And Denver can pay him. You know, they're going to want to keep him. All right. So they got Joker at a max contract. They got Murray at a max contract. They might max out Jeremy Grant to keep him because as you saw, he was guarding LeBron. He was guarding Kawhi. He was guarding Paul George. He was guarding anybody on the other team that is the toughest cover. He was covering them. And then he was hitting big threes on the other side. Talk about a stretch forward. Talk about a 2-way player. So I think we were seeing the development of Jeremy Grant into a top tier, top 25 player right before our eyes this past playoffs. So they're going to pay him. So nobody that's going to get drafted next year is going to take Jeremy Grant's place. Okay. But every year, everybody is replaceable. Okay. Cause there's always new talent coming out. Now, this particular draft, 2020, this is a sleeper draft. This is definitely a sleeper draft, which means you can have some stars in this draft. You can have some superstars in this draft, but they're sleepers. Like nobody knows who they are. There's nobody just popping out at you saying this is a superstar. There's flashy players like LaMelo Ball. There's flashy players. That doesn't mean he's going to be a superstar. There's athletic players, okay, like Anthony Edwards and James Wiseman. That doesn't mean they're going to be superstars. There's nothing that's telling you because every one of them got blemishes that's saying, man, is this guy, this is a risk. Then you might get a guy that's drafted at 20. That's the superstar. You don't know. So this is a sleeper draft. Whereas next year, you got a lot of kids that people are talking about, this is a sure thing. This is a superstar. This is an impact player. Okay. Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green. They're talking about these guys being impact players from day one. Boston, talking about, he's going to Kentucky, and they're talking about him being impact player from day one. And John Calipari basically recruits future pros. So you have 5 or 6 guys at the guard spot that we can snap next year. And then that's not even talking about there's a number of wings that are also impact players. So you want to find out what you are getting. So you got to push your players this year to see what you have so you can make that decision next year. This is not the year to be trying to trade up. There's nobody in this draft that's worth trading up for. Nobody. Okay? And all you point guard hungry people, you have to look at next year. Don't look at this year. Look at next year. This year we got our guards. We want to see what Frank has. We want to see what Dennis has. We want to see what Dot has. We want to see what all of the guys we have drafted over the last 3 years, we want to see what they have. We want to see Iggy Bryce-Davis. We want to see what he has. You want to see what Kenny Wooten has. Are these guys part of the future? Well, this is the year to find out. This is the year to find out. And I think that's what the Knicks are going to do. If you want, the people they're talking about adding, and this is what I'm telling you, the people we're talking about adding are only being added, or we're looking at people that are going to complement the kids that we have. Okay? Complement them. Bring out the best in them. We don't want a person that's going to be a ball hog or take minutes from one of the kids we're trying to find out what we have. Okay? Unless you get a kid like a Jeremy Grant who's 26 who would fit the New York Knicks timeline. You know, by the time we're ready to talk about deep playoff runs and championships, Jeremy Grant might be 28, 29. Still in his prime. He fits the timeline. Or Christian Wood, who's now 24, 25 years old. And in 2 or 3 years, he's 27, 28. In his prime. He fits the timeline. Okay. But other than that, you want, that's why we talked about specialists like a David Bertans or Gallinari. These are specialists because they will open the floor to bring out the best talents in the guys we have. Now, in terms of who we're drafting this year, what you want, you're not looking at position. Actually, I would shy away from point guards this year, honestly, because again, the better point guards are coming out next year, not this year, next year. Okay. I would look at wing players because again, you build your championship teams on defense and on athletic wings that can guard multiple positions. Okay. So the Knicks are talking about, Vassell or Isaac Okoro. These are guys that are versatile enough and ready to play today. That's what you're talking about. Okay, you're talking about that at 8. And then you want to try to get, another guy, maybe a stretch 4 later on. Or, I like Tyler Bay. A lot of you guys like that. I like Desmond Bain, maybe a shooter or a guy that can play multiple positions or wing like a Tyler Bay. You want to talk about these guys this year. And these are guys that you can put out there to play. They can play now. Devin Vassell can play right now. You can put him, he may not start. I don't know if he'll start or not, but even if he doesn't start, he's going to be a heavy rotation player on the wing. He's going to get a lot of minutes. You want to see what you got. Because next year, there could be another wing. Okay? Okay, there could be a Brandon Boston Jr. come out. He could play the wing. There could be some guys coming out that you don't know that could be tremendous because there's a lot of talent coming out next year. So you want to see what you got this year to see what you're going to pluck next year. You may want to trade next year to make sure you can snag one of these top guards. You might want to, like I said, we're talking about Jalen Suggs. He's going to be at Gonzaga this year. 6'6" freshman, 200 pounds. They say he's a downhill type player, powerful type player. You got a Terrence Clark, another wing, 6'7", 185, going to Kentucky. Scores at will. These are the type of guys you want to talk about for next year. So for 2021, we're not looking at who we're going to sign as a free agent. We're looking at who we're going to draft. And in order to figure that out, we got to see what we got now. So out of what we have today, you want to push them and whoever survives, because there's always better players coming out the next season. There's always another guy coming out. Okay. And on the Knicks, nobody's untouchable, but in terms of that scenario. But when I say we're not looking to trade anybody this year, we're going to see what we have. We're trying to develop. We're trying to change the culture. So we're not trying to trade anybody this year. That's one of our young guys that we're trying to develop and see what we have. Okay. So as Tom Thibodeau said just this past week, talking about Frank Ntilikina and Dennis Smith Jr., his words, not mine, he said, quote, "This is an important year for both players." He said, this is an important year for both players. That means this is the year to put up or shut up. And I love Frank. And I like Dennis Smith too. But this is the year this is not the year to have a sore groin and miss 10 games. This is not the year to do that. This is the year to put up or shut up. And you got to allow them to put up. You have to put them in a position where they could do that. You can't be riding the bench with them and giving them DMPs. They got to play. So that's why I say they're not looking at any guards this year. Forget Kyra Lewis, forget LaMelo Ball. I don't think they should look at any of these guys. They got the point guards. They got to find out what they have with them. And then you're looking at the point guard class for next year because you got impact players coming. And you want to see if you can grab one of them and who on the team today is going to be able to fit with them. Okay? So now tell me what you all think. Shalom.